Joining us today. By way of introductions, I'm Tim Greeff. I'm the founder and CEO of the National Security Technology Accelerator, also known as NSTXL. We are a consortium manager for the Space Enterprise Consortium, or the SPEC OTA, and we're really privileged to be joined today by one of the both SPEC members as well as a performer on a SPEC project, Mr. Peter Beck, who's the founder, president, and CEO of Rocket Lab. Peter, welcome.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, no, appreciate your time. So just to get started, wanted to just kick off with tell us a little about yourself, your background, and Rocket Lab, both where it was and where it is now.
Yeah, so I started Rocket Lab back in 2006 down in New Zealand. That's why I have probably I talk a little bit funny. But that's where the company started, and then in 2013 we flipped into being a US company, and from there onwards we raised various capital rounds through venture capital, and ultimately listed on the NASDAQ through to today. We're most well known for our Electron rocket. It's a small rocket launched 30 some times. It's actually the second most frequently launched US rocket behind our friends over at SpaceX. So we've launched a bunch, but what's probably less well known about Rocket Lab is our Space Systems division, which ironically is larger than our launch division. And it builds a number of spacecraft. So we have missions going to Mars for NASA, and we have large full build constellations for customers, as well as providing lots of components for other people's satellites, from solar through to reaction wheels and the full gambit. So what we're really trying to build here is an end-to-end space company, and that's kind of where we're at.
Excellent. Now, did you always have an interest in space technology coming up? How did you personally decide to kind of go this route and start your own company?
Yeah, look, for me, it was I had two passions in life, and that was engineering and space. So if you can join those together, then you end up building a rocket if you're lucky. So that's what really happened. And of course, I was born down in New Zealand that had zero space industry. Like, space just was not an option. Really, in a lot of respects, we had to create that from scratch, and I had a relatively untraditional rise to building the company. But at the end of the day, those two passions are really what drives me.
Excellent. Well, it's interesting. So to pivot off that, for so long, space development has been a primarily government-driven enterprise, all the way back to the space race of the 50s and 60s, and then commercial space development. And most people don't know that the space shuttle was actually done with NASA through an OTA vehicle, similar to the one that SPEC did. Correct. So space and OTAs have had a long history together. But I'm curious if we're now seeing this massive shift from sort of government-controlled, government-funded space development to more reliance on commercial space technology development, and also more commercial companies leading the way on space themselves. How do you see that changing the landscape of the sort of government-commercial interaction and the need for more collaboration between the two?
Yeah, it's super interesting, actually, because my kind of belief here is that where governments excel is doing things where it's not really commercially viable. So doing things that we need to create a capability, or there's a defense reason, and where kind of commercial excels is when there's a dollar to be made, then commercial enterprise will find the most optimum, the most efficient way to create that service or that capability or that product. So I see government's role as doing the things that don't make commercial sense, and often that creates industries in its own right. And I think that's where we kind of got to with space right now, is that launch is a great example. Launch, it wasn't commercially viable for companies to really do launch. So the government created and sponsored launch, through to the point that it was commercially viable, and then now you see industry really leading the way in launch and launch services. So I think it's a super interesting time because there's a number of those technologies that are sort of on that pivoting point. And you take kind of moon exploration. So that's an interesting experiment where, is going to the moon commercially viable or not? And I think that's kind of the experiment of the day, if you will, because typically that would have only been a government thing. Because it wouldn't have been commercially viable, but we're kind of floating on that knife edge right now. Maybe it is commercially viable, that's why you see programs like SLS and other things like that, where it's kind of, it takes a huge investment, and only a government can make that level of investment with kind of uncertainty around commercial viability.
Excellent. So on that, from a standpoint of that government private sector interaction, there's been, from a standpoint of spec in the OT vehicle. So it was originally formed, it has its roots in space. So it was originally formed, and Congress passed the authority for what before it was NASA became NASA during the space race, to help win the space race against the Soviet Union at the time, and then against Space Shuttle, SpaceX, et cetera. A lot of this has been done through OTAs. So they've always been really tied to space technology and has its roots there. I'm curious to your thoughts, as you've been, a member of NSTXL and a member of the SPEC consortium and a performer on that. What you feel are the advantages of using this type of model to facilitate that government and private sector interaction?
Yeah, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's like it really does exemplify that government and commercial relationship in creating capability. So for us, it's been a really fantastic mechanism, and I think generally across the whole space sector, I think it's a very effective way of executing things.
So let's dig in a little bit, because you're performing on a project currently under spec, and if I have it correct, you've teamed on that solution. So I was wondering if whatever you're permitted to talk about, how that project's going, and just sort of a high level overview of what that current project is under spec.
Yeah, so I mean, we were lucky to to win a project under the NSSL program for an upper stage development, and that program really enables us to work very closely with a government customer. And as you're developing a new launch vehicle, having that super close relationship with the customer as you're developing something really ensures that you develop a product that is useful at the end of it, rather than us kind of going off and developing something that we think is the right solution. Actually having the opportunity to work directly with the customer, and it's in the early formation of the project, is super useful, so that at the end the product or the service is useful to the government customer, and or there's not a huge delta between the product you bring to market or the service you bring to market and what the customer ultimately needs, which just means you have to go back and do a whole bunch of work. So that's really I think that's a huge advantage.
Excellent. And so more generally, what do you see in your position, as a company that has grown rapidly and looks to be continuing to grow, as you guys are looking at it, and also you personally with your expertise, as you look across space as a technology domain, what do you see as some of the challenges on the horizon, no pun intended, for kind of space tech development, future areas of growth and need, and some of the challenges now that we have such a rapidly developing commercial use of space technology as we kind of move forward and develop new tech?
Yeah, I think that's so. The exciting thing about the space industry is it's kind of everyone's witnessing the democratization of it in real time, which is super exciting, because I remember growing up as a child and just lamenting that I wasn't born in the Apollo era, because I always believed that was the time to be alive in the space industry. And growing up, I never ever thought I would run my own space company. That was just an absurd proposition. But I think that's one of the most exciting things is that we are witnessing this democratization now. The challenge that goes along with that is, and the question that everybody asks is, is the market going to be there? Is the market going to sustain the growth that we all hope and project? If you look at a lot of the reports, pick a number anywhere between $1 and $3 trillion industry by 2050 or 2040. And that's an extraordinary amount of growth in an industry that's currently at $360 billion annually, in a pretty short period of time. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge, if you will, and the thing that I think about the most is the market growth has been near vertical, which is great, but is that trajectory going to continue? I don't think there's any doubt that it's going to continue to grow. It's just at what rate and in what time frame. That creates challenges, if for the industry, if the growth rate isn't as fast as people think, then a lot of the capability that's been created may not have applications to the scale that's required to make them sustainable. So that's probably the biggest challenge. I think for me, and we not surprisingly, this is what we're kind of pursuing from Rocket Lab's perspective, is I think the big space companies of the future are not going to be just a launch company or a satellite company. We see firsthand when you combine both launch and satellites and spacecraft under the one roof, where you can really optimize solutions, to get infrastructural capability on orbit. So as I look forward in the future, I think that the really big space companies are going to be companies that have a launch vehicle in their quiver, but also have the ability to build just about any spacecraft that's required.
That's interesting. So from a standpoint, just to switch gears a little bit, speaking as, again, a growing business and someone who is doing both, commercial and government work, one thing that we're always trying to do is help to educate and bridge that gap between the public and the private sector and how they could work more seamlessly. And one role that NSTXL often plays is that we always educate our members of, what it's like to be on a government contract, particularly first-time performers and non-professionals that have never done that before. But at the same time, we also want to continue to serve that same education role to program offices and agreement officers across the government about what the pressures are from the standpoint of the commercial sector in trying to adapt processes and procedures to government expectations and government timelines. Yep. So just from a standpoint of being a performer and being on the commercial side, what do you think is important that government program offices and the government should know about working with really innovative companies that aren't necessarily used to that government timetables, procedures, et cetera, as they look to expand their engagement in the commercial sector?
Yeah, look, there's really two obvious things here. So the first one is, from a launch perspective, I'll give you is government customers very, very rarely turn up on time. So we have kind of like a 50% government customer base and 50% commercial customer base. And, the commercial customers always turn up on time, but sometimes they can be slow paying their bills. Government customer always pays their bills on time, but never ever turns up on time. And the challenge for that is that when, from a launch perspective, you're selling launches, but you're kind of selling the slots. So each month, since April, we've launched once a month this year. And if a government customer slips out, and doesn't consume that launch slot, then there's not enough time to react to put a commercial customer in its place. So you basically just lose that revenue or lose that spot, through the year, which is really, really painful. And I think we've had a fantastic relationship with many, many government customers. The thing that we always ask is to just be super transparent about the readiness, because there's kind of there's kind of a natural, what's the right word? It's kind of natural, emphasis to leave it to the last moment to tell somebody that they're going to miss their launch date, and that's really painful. So that's a challenge that that a big difference between the commercial and the government world is just like holding to schedule is really important. And then I think the other thing is I think it's probably probably yeah, probably the biggest element.
Excellent. So from a standpoint of looking forward at what is next and sort of the signals that you're seeing, I'm curious about, we focus a lot on the US government's space development, and we support obviously Space Force and DoD through SPEC. What is the importance of international collaboration in some of these efforts? Because obviously we're not the only country with space. There's sort of increasing proliferation in the number of countries that are engaging in space. And you yourself being located in New Zealand, there's a lot of great space tech being developed in Europe and other countries. What are you seeing as far as international collaboration on space that sort of overlays with that government commercial collaboration?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think friends and allies should stick together. I think we have enjoyed that immensely. Obviously we operate a launch pad at Wallops Island in Virginia, and we operate a launch pad in New Zealand. And we launched the first ever NRO payload from another country out in down in New Zealand. Obviously, New Zealand is a Five Eye ally, and I think keeping the allies close. Especially at the moment in this kind of uncertainty in our world, I think that's super important. And look, space is often being used as the domain of kind of political softening. If you look at the difference between the example between Russia and the US, I mean, the ability to use space really kind of cooled down some Cold War tensions there, and you started to see collaborations. And then even at this point in time, when Russia is just gone off the rails, from an international and political perspective, there's still a collaboration in space. And I think that is the amazing thing about space, is it can kind of supersede all of these things. So yeah, I think continued collaboration is super good. But I mean, make no mistake, the US is the powerhouse in space, and I think it behooves everybody for the US to stay the powerhouse in space.
My sort of last question on this, from it's big part from the collaboration standpoint, is what you see as the role of academia and universities as far as driving into the value chain of innovation, how you see the importance of that interaction, and is that something that y'all experience as a company as well, and is it something that SPEC helps enable? Is it something that you see what's needed there? Because we oftentimes get a sense of universities have their own, they're sort of another kind of institution. A lot of them are large government institutions, but we have amazing research coming out of universities and academia still. But oftentimes we hear the frustration about how do you connect that, how do you access that. Yeah. So I'd be curious about your experience in that, how we can be helpful and facilitate better innovation there.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we enjoy a very solid pipeline of fantastic talent from universities. So, we have a really robust education program that just doesn't work with universities. It actually goes right down to primary school kids. Their Space Ambassadors program, because I think one of the biggest challenges the industry is facing right now, and we certainly feel it, and everybody within the industry is feeling it, is a strong pipeline of talent. And we need to make sure that space remains cool, and that kids pursue careers in engineering and STEM and related activities. So there is the pipeline for the future. And universities, obviously, not just a great pipeline of talent, but as you kind of rightly point out, great centers of excellence for particular elements of research, which we've leveraged to great effect over the years. And whether it be sponsoring final year projects or PhDs, I think we've done 6 or 7 PhDs now, all of which ended up working for us. And we sponsored their entire academic PhD career, and as well as master's students, and even we have a scholarship program that funds students right from when they leave school right through to the end of their the university degree. And we've found that incredibly useful. And perhaps it's a little bit selfish because generally we're picking great kids who show huge talent that ultimately end up working for us. So perhaps it's a little bit cooked. But nevertheless, we really see the huge value.
Excellent. Yeah, you got to get them hooked, while they're young, and then it's got to feel good to help empower the next Peter Beck for the future.
Well, I don't know. We don't have too many Peter Becks running around the world. I'm not sure that's good for everybody, but certainly, what we did find is that primary school students, that's where you have to start, because by the time a student has got to kind of high school and about to go to college, and they've already made up their mind, they've decided that they're not going to be an entrepreneur, they've decided they're at least a generalized direction. So we actually put the majority of our focus in our school programs actually in primary schools, to get young kids thinking about careers in STEM and in space.
That's incredible, and it's a really nice and it's a nice reminder and an eloquent point, just about the importance of the ecosystem, and that the tentacles of the work that we're doing through SPEC and the work that Rocket Lab is doing has tentacles into even lower education, and helps develop that next generation of talent, and make space cool to the bright minds coming up, so that we always have a robust pipeline of talent. Well, Peter, we want to be respectful of your time. We know you're super busy. That covers it for the question I had. But if you had any closing thoughts or other comments you wanted to make, the floor is open.
Oh gosh, no, not really. I mean, it's been a fantastic talk, and I think I really appreciate all the work that you and your team do, Tim. And we've certainly been it's been great for us. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to chatting again.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.